But you're also here because you heard that Jews for Jesus was going to be here and was going to be sharing a special Seder dinner with us. And you probably came thinking, I would like to know a little bit more about the context of that meal that Jesus shared with his people, his guys that night. And so I'm with you. So let's invite Josh to come on up and share a little bit about what it was like that night and what each one of these things on this table represent.
All right.
Thanks for being here.
Okay, great. Well, what a joy. I have to tell you, being here is great. I was here a couple of years ago, shared Passover then. It's great to be back. For me, though, this is my first... oh, hello, you. I know you guys. This is my first time back speaking at a church in over a year. So this is it's a little emotional, but it is. I tell you, I've missed being with God's people. I've missed being in different churches. One of the great joys that I have is, I can speak in a Methodist church and a Calvary chapel and a Lutheran church and a Presbyterian church and get a chance to see the body in really a remarkable way. And so I'm just thrilled to be here. Pastor Bill, great to be back. I know you're good friends with Avi and all of the people. I mean, texts from Paul, what's better than that? So it's Passover, so maybe Moses will send us one. So, okay. So it's really a real joy. So tonight we are celebrating Passover. It's what the table's about, what we're going to talk about. If you're here and you're Jewish, happy Passover, because we are in Passover. So we're in the week of Passover. Saturday night was the first night of Passover, Erev Pesach, it's generally called. The first night. So if you celebrated with your family, I hope it was a joyous time. We had one in person in our backyard with a small group, and then we did a Zoom Seder, which is always interesting. Try singing Hebrew prayers on Zoom with your family. So it's hard enough in person at a table. So it's really great. So let me ask you, how many here have ever done a Seder before, has celebrated a Passover? Okay, so maybe about half of you good. Okay, so I don't know how to advance the slides, but you can do. I'll just next one. There we go. Okay, so all of you have at least one visual image of Passover burned into your collective memories. It's this, okay? This is Da Vinci's painting of the Last Supper, where Jesus and his disciples were seated at the Passover table, probably not all on one side of the table, but they were seated at the Passover table, and what they were doing was celebrating Passover. That's what the Last Supper was. And so, as artists have a chance to kind of explain and interpret what's going on, Da Vinci painted some interesting things in this painting. First of all, they're all wearing beautiful, interesting, colorful clothes, and they're eating some interesting things. It might be hard to tell, but is there anything that you can see on the table that they're eating? You would think it's matzo balls, but it's not. It's loaves of bread. Interesting. It's supposed to be this, okay? This is matzah. This is what we eat on Passover. It's unleavened bread without yeast. It looks a little bit like cardboard. Tastes a little bit like cardboard. Thank you very much. My children, they're older now, but they still do the same thing. They buy a tub of Nutella at the beginning of Passover, and matzah is really just a vehicle for chocolate to enter into their bodies. So matzah on Passover. But there's one more thing on the Seder table that on the painting it's a little hard to tell, but on each side of the painting, there's 2 plates of fish. Now, it's interesting to ask why the fish is there. And it's true, some of the disciples were fishermen, but more likely, Da Vinci thought that the Last Supper probably happened on a Friday night, right? Of course. And Jesus, who was a good Catholic, would eat fish on Friday nights. What else would he do? So, sometimes when we all do this, don't we, right? We look at the Bible through our own lenses. We imagine what their life was like. We imagine what their families were like. And we use ourselves as the measuring stick. We all do it, and it's totally natural. But as we read more and as we learn more, what we come to discover is that the world of the ancient world, Jesus' world, was very different than ours. They had all kinds of different things that they did. And so one of those things is Passover. And so what I want to do for you tonight is share with you a little bit of Passover. We're going to talk a bit about how Jesus celebrated Passover, what it was like in the first century. We're going to talk a little bit about how Passover is celebrated today, because today it's a little different. The tradition of Passover, the celebration of Passover grew and it developed over years. And so what Jesus did is probably about maybe 50-60% of what most Jewish people will do today. But many of the main elements were in there. So I'm going to walk you through a traditional Passover table, which is this, and with all of these different items, we'll talk about different ones. And as we do, there is something that I want you to keep an eye on, to remember, to focus your attention on. Because Passover and the story of redemption from Egypt is the biblical story of redemption. When the biblical writers want to explain to you what redemption is, they say, well, it's like what happened in Egypt. Redemption is talked about in Exodus, in the writings, in the prophets, in the Psalms, in the wisdom literature, in the New Testament, all pointing back to the story of redemption. So keep your eyes on this. One of the lyrics of the songs that we sang, the worship team led us in, was, "You laid down your life that I might be set free." Amen? That message is here in the Passover story. That's the basis of what Passover is like. The laying down of a life so that others might be set free. So, let's get going. So we're going to open up and read a few verses from the Gospel of Luke. We can go to the next slide. There we go. Okay. So, I still need my reading glasses. Okay. Actually, that makes it worse. All right. So I'll go look at that one. Okay. So Luke 22, 7 and 8 and 13 through 14 say this. Then came the day of unleavened bread. That's Passover. Okay. On which the Passover lamb had to be sacrificed. So Jesus sent Peter and John, saying, "Go and prepare the Passover for us, that we may eat it." And they went and found things just as Jesus had told them. And they prepared the Passover, and when the hour came, he reclined at the table and the apostles with him. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So Passover begins a week-long holiday that's called the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And actually, in the week of Passover, there are 3 biblical holidays: Passover, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, and the Festival of First Fruits. And all of these holidays are in a way, they're considered Passover. And one of the things that you do on Passover is, or at least one of the things you don't do on Passover, is eat leaven or eat yeast. So, in many families, what we do is we go through a process of cleaning out or clearing out the leaven. Clearing out the leaven out of our house. So, everything that has yeast, you put in a bag What happens in my family is my wife takes it all, puts it in a couple of big bags, and puts it in the garage. Why? Because her husband forgets. And it's day 4, and I pour myself a bowl of Cheerios, and there you go, out the window. Okay, so what we do is we clean out all the leaven, and actually there's a lot of fun traditions about this, but one of them is that there is this tradition that the night before Passover, the head of the house goes through the home, with a little candle and a feather and a wooden spoon, and he goes to search for all of the little crumbs of leaven, and what he finds he sweeps in, and then goes outside and destroys them. Jews probably did that like in the old country. Now we use vacuum cleaners and other things like that. But the same idea is we clean out our house of leaven. And so that's how the Passover begins, this process. But, it also has a spiritual implication, because leaven is also a symbol of sin. Leaven grows, right? You don't even have to do anything, and leaven grows. It puffs up. In the temple and in the tabernacle, in the Bible, leaven was never allowed to be on the altar. Whenever sacrifices were made of bread or grain or anything, it had to be unleavened. So there is something connected with leaven and yeast in the Bible. And there's a great spiritual lesson that sin in our own lives grows. It doesn't just stay the same. It builds up. And there's a lesson for us in Passover that we need to clean out the leaven of our lives, maybe even with a candle going into the dark places. So next slide. So what we're going to do is celebrate today, what Jews celebrate on Passover is something called a Seder. And it's a traditional meal that has 14 elements, and that meal is recorded in a book like this called a Haggadah. This Haggadah is the most popular Haggadah ever printed. It's printed by Maxwell House Coffee. And there was a Jewish guy in New York who was part of their marketing team who decided to write a Passover Haggadah, and these things sold like hotcakes, or hot coffee, whatever you want to go. So, okay, sorry, that was a really bad joke. Okay, so the Haggadah, though, the way this works is that if you're at my house or celebrating Passover, you would, this is how Jewish holidays work, okay? You come to the house, everybody gets a book, you don't eat for 2 hours, and you talk about suffering. There we go. If you've ever wondered how it works, that's how it works. Okay, so this book is kind of like it's like a play. Think about it. So there's parts for everybody to read. There's parts for the moms and the dads and the children. There's songs. There's readings in Hebrew. There's readings in English. There are things that we eat. There are things that we say. We sit down in a certain way. We stand up at various times. And so as we go through all of this really multimedia experience, the idea is that we are experiencing Passover as if each one of us were coming out of Egypt. That's the goal. The goal of celebrating Passover is to remember and to identify with those slaves in Egypt that were being set free from Pharaoh. And this is something that enables us to do that. So just for some interest, the Passover Haggadah was finalized, that order, in the 2nd century. For 1,800 years, Jewish people have been following the same guidelines, celebrating this all over the world. It's a remarkable event. It's probably my favorite holiday of the year. So, next slide. So that's the Haggadah. Sorry, we can go to the next one. Okay, so the Passover begins, as all Jewish holidays do, with the lighting of the candles. Okay? So what we're going to do is I'm going to light these candles, but typically it is the woman of the house that lights the candles. Okay? The light of the candles symbolizes God's presence as the glory of God shone in the temple. The light of the candles symbolizes that God's glory is shining here when we are with us. So, women, all women, whether you're married or not, young, old. Oops, sorry, that was me. So somehow, point your hands toward me or something like that. Do something to acknowledge. Okay, only the women. I know men, you want to be part of the action, but this isn't for you. Okay, so I'm going to light the candles. I'm going to say the blessing in Hebrew, and I'm going to ask you to say the blessing with me in English. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kidshanu b'mitzvotov v'tzivanu al lehadlik ner shel Pesach. Blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has commanded us to light the Passover candles. Women, you are the ones that invite God's presence into the home. Honestly, without you, our lives would be a much emptier place. Next slide. The next step of the Passover is the drinking of the first cup. Okay, during the Passover, we drink 4 cups. Each one has a different significance. These cups are based on 4 promises in Exodus 12, verses 12 through 13, where God says, I will 4 times. So we have the 4 cups to remind us of those 4 drinks. So the first time, honestly, you have 1 cup that you refill 4 times, okay? But I have 4 to just show you. So the first cup is called the Kiddush cup, or the cup of sanctification. The second is called the cup of plagues. The third is the cup of redemption. This cup's a little different here. Pay attention. This kind of is the focal point of the evening. And the fourth is the cup of praise. But it's with this first cup that the host holds aloft and offers a blessing for all the service to follow. And holding this Kiddush cup, he offers praise and thanks to God Almighty, the creator of the fruit of the vine. And here's the blessing. I'll say it in Hebrew, and then maybe we'll all say it together in English. And if you're at home watching this, you can say it also. So in Hebrew, the blessing goes like this. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei pri hagafen. Amen. And in English, blessed art thou, O Lord our God, King of the universe, creator of the fruit of the vine. Amen. And then you drink it. Okay. We can go to the next. Okay, now. So what happens now in the Seder is that the children, usually the youngest child, comes forward to ask the meaning of Passover, and he or she recites the traditional 4 questions. Now, this is a big deal in Jewish homes. Usually it's done in Hebrew. This is, for many kids, their first big chunk of Hebrew that they remember or they learn. Our kids ask the 4 questions, when they're in maybe 1st or 2nd grade. And so it's the process of learning Hebrew, learning the tradition, and the questions are asked, and then answered in the context of the Seder. So the first one is Manishtana, which is, in English, why is this night different from all other nights? Different night, strange night. We eat all kinds of different foods. And so we explain that this night is different because, and we say this line, because of what the Lord did for me when he brought me out of the land of Egypt. You can go to the next slide. Passover tells the story of the redemption from Egypt, that God heard the cries of the slaves in Egypt. God is not deaf to the cries of those that are in slavery. He can hear them. He mourns for them. And in the case of those Jewish people in Egypt, God sent Moses, a redeemer, who would go in and argue their case against Pharaoh. And you remember the story, right? We saw the movie, right? So we're familiar with this. So there's 10 plagues. There's Pharaoh. Moses goes, and Pharaoh says 10 times no. And these 10 times Pharaoh says no. There are plagues poured upon the Egyptians, but finally they are set free. You can go to the next slide. And the final plague of these 10, the 10th plague, is called the death of the firstborn. Now, that's a plague. I could pretty much guarantee that this year, as Jews have celebrated Passover, they've included COVID-19 as one of the plagues. And that's okay. That's fine to do. This is a kind of a flexible event. But in the biblical story, the 10th plague was the angel of death. And here's the way it would go. At night, after the last time that Pharaoh said no, an angel who is actually God himself would go through the houses of Egypt and strike dead the firstborn, the one whom you put your hopes and your dreams, the firstborn son. And he would strike dead that firstborn son. Except those houses that had blood of a lamb painted on the doorposts of their homes. It's a very graphic thing. We can't even imagine doing something like this. But you would take a spotless lamb, a lamb that had nothing wrong with it, perfect. That lamb would be killed, its blood painted on the doors. The angel would then see the blood on the doors of the homes, and death would pass over. That's why we call the holiday Passover. Next house, blood on the doors, Passover. Next house, no blood on the doors. Firstborn would be killed. First, just a curiosity, who here is a firstborn? Raise your hand. Yeah, there you go. So, this was a big deal in Egypt. This was a horrible time. It was a horrible night. But as a result of that, Israel was set free. Israel, whom God called my firstborn son. And through the death of that lamb, they would be set free. Now, importantly, if they were Jewish, right, ethnically Jews in Egypt, and they said, nah, we're not going to do this, their firstborn would die. Similarly, if they were not Jewish and they heard about this and they put blood on their doors, or they went into another home that had blood on its doors, they would be spared. And the idea is that redemption from Egypt was not about ethnicity. It wasn't about whether or not you were Jewish, but it was whether or not you were under the blood of the Lamb. Because it was the blood of the Lamb that enabled them to be set free. Sounds like what we sang. This keeps coming back again. So this final plague is part of the story that we tell of the Exodus from Egypt, and this is part of how we answer the child when they ask that first question. Okay, next slide. Next question. On all other nights we eat either leavened or unleavened bread. Why on this night do we only eat the unleavened bread, the matzah? And we explain that when we left Egypt, we had to leave very quickly, in haste, and we couldn't allow our bread to rise. And so we eat matzah. In fact, at this point in the Seder, we just eat some matzah, and you're supposed to eat it fast. Again, to remind you that we left Egypt quickly. Now, one of the interesting items on the Passover table is this one. This is called a matzah tash. Okay, that just means matzah bag. Inside are 3 pieces of matzah. Okay, and the middle piece at this point is taken out, and it's broken in half. One half is wrapped up in a cloth, and it's hidden away. It's part of a game that we play with the children. It's called the afikomen. The afikomen is hidden, okay? Later, it has to be found, and if it isn't found, the service can't go on. But for now, the child has to kind of hold on and pay attention. So, you noticed I only have half. The other half we hid in here before you came. So, the children are supposed to be the ones that look for it, but my guess is there's a lot of people here who feel youthful, right? Right? So, you can't look for it now. That's part of the rule. But later on, everyone will get a chance to look for it, and I'll tell you where it is. But for now, you have to pay attention. So there you go, back to childhood. Okay, so now we go on to the next question that the child asks. Actually, the next 3 questions. Why on this night do we eat vegetables and herbs of all kinds? But on this night, only bitter herbs. You're required to eat bitter herbs. Why on other nights do we not dip our herbs once, but now we dip them twice? And why on other nights do we sit upright or reclining? Why on this night do we have to recline? So on Passover, you are commanded to recline to the left. So if you want to make it real tonight, just with me for a minute, just lean to the left. There you go. That's kind of fun. I'll go this way and you guys go that way. Okay, so did you notice that Jesus and the disciples reclined at the table? It's not because they were tired. It's because it was Passover. And they were following the normal course of things of celebrating their meal, reclining, showing that today they are not slaves, or we are not slaves, so we can sit as free, redeemed people, reclining on chairs, comfortably sitting, enjoying a meal with our family and friends. So let's go to the next slide. Now we come to the Seder Plate, which is this guy here. So the way it would work is the plate actually sits on the table, kind of like we see here, and there's different bits of food on this plate, okay? And we eat these different items, and by eating, we are reminded of the story of redemption. So we tell the story verbally, right? Now we tell the story through taste. And you know, and I know, that when we taste something, it builds a memory in us. There are memories that are connected to tastes and smells that all you have to do is taste one little thing, and you are brought back to another place in your life instantly. Food has this incredible power to be able to do that. And the rabbis built that into this holiday. And you have some very unique, unusual foods. So, let's go through them. So the first one is called karpas. And that just means greens. And we have parsley, okay? And the greens represent life. So Israel, if some of you get a chance to go to Israel, what you will discover is the climate in Israel is almost identical to Southern California. Okay, so on the hills, there's a little bit of green, but not that much. So anything that has this really deep green, bright green color symbolizes life, and we eat it. But before we eat it, we dip it in very salty water. The salt water represents tears. So by dipping, we're reminded that a life without redemption is a life that's immersed in tears. And so we dip it in there. And in our family, what we do is we dip, we hold it up, we let it drip, and we look at the drips, and we're reminded of the tears that we shed when we were slaves in Egypt. For me, this is one of the tastes of Passover. Parsley dipped in salt water. Now, the next one, fortunately, we don't eat. We just look at it, and we think about it. We reflect. Okay? So this is the root of the bitter herb, the Hazaret, and there you have a horseradish root or an onion. A variety of things can be used for these. It doesn't have to be one particular thing. And so, but the idea is that here we're reminded to reflect on the bitterness of slavery, and the idea that it really is like a root. You know, it's when you are enslaved, the very bottom part of your life is bitter at the core. And so we have this as a reminder. I will say that Passover is supposed to be a holiday today that engenders in us empathy. If we celebrate Passover and we don't consider those who are in slavery today, we've missed the point. We should be changed as we remember our bitterness of slavery. We should be changed to remember those that are in slavery of various forms today. And we, in this world that we live in a time that slavery still exists in a variety of forms. And so Passover ought to be something that helps us to be aware of that at the very least, but hopefully to do something about it. Now, the next item on the Seder plate is the maror. This is the bitter herbs. This is the first dipping that we read about. Okay, so the bitter herbs, what we have here is horseradish, okay? Not the creamy kind, but the good kind, all right? Now, you're supposed to eat horseradish. You take a little piece of matzah, you scoop yourself up some, and there's always a question, right? What's the question? How much are you supposed to eat? Right? So the rabbis knew that we would ask this question, so they answered it for us. You are supposed to eat the volume equivalent to half an egg. So that's about that much. Okay. Yeah, right. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. Okay. So, do you know what happens when you eat that much horseradish, by the way? Yeah, tears come running down your cheeks. That's the point. You're supposed to remember the bitterness of slavery. And so once you eat that and recover, and, that might take a while, depending on how hot your horseradish is, then you come to the next item, which is Haroset, this apple mixture. So as the horseradish is supposed to remind you of bitterness of slavery, here the apples are supposed to remind you of the mortar, the bricks that we were required to make. Although it's interesting because it's very sweet. So it's made with apples and honey and raisins and nuts, sometimes dates, and you eat it and you make a little sandwich. Okay, so you take 2 pieces of matzah, scoop yourself out some apple mixture, and then, just to remind yourself that we're still celebrating a holiday that is bitter, You mix a little bit more horseradish into your sandwich. Listen, I didn't make the rules, okay? So don't shoot the messenger. And you put it together and you eat it. You eat it as one. So, so all of these items we eat, they're very evocative. The last two items are kind of interesting. They were added quite a bit later, certainly after Jesus, because they have to do with the destruction of the temple in Jerusalem. An egg, the hagigah, and the last one is a bone, the shank bone, the zeroah. And each of these are symbolic of the Passover sacrifice that was offered in the temple. Did you notice that Jesus said, "We will eat the Passover lamb"? That's because when he lived, the temple still stood. And each group of people, probably him, his disciples, their families, were all there at the Last Supper. They would have all gone in together on a lamb. It would have been brought to the temple, sacrificed, the meat brought back home, cooked, and that would have been their meal. But in 70 AD, the temple was destroyed, and with it, the altar. And so from that time to this day, no sacrifices have been made. And so on Passover, we eat an egg, a roasted egg, to remind us of the roasted Passover lamb. And we have a bone with no meat on it to remind us of the sacrifice that's missing. Pretty interesting. So there's a part of Passover in this story that is not fulfilled. It reminds me of all of the words in the New Testament, all of the times when Jesus is referred to. John the Baptist looking at Jesus saying, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." You see, God himself provided a sacrifice for us. There has been a lamb that has been sacrificed so that we might be set free. That lamb was not an animal, but that lamb was the Messiah himself, the one who came as the Passover lamb to set us free from a life of sin and death. Amen? Amen. Okay, we're now to the next cup, the cup of plagues. So in Jewish tradition, a full cup represents complete joy. But in one sense, when we think about this cup, our joy is not complete. We pour out some of the contents of this cup, sometimes 10 drops for each one of the plagues. And as we do, we are remembering the plagues that were poured out upon the Egyptians. We mourn for them. We express sorrow. And at the end of this cup, then, we break from the Passover and have our meal. And so instead of serving you a meal, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about Jews for Jesus, a little bit about the work of Jews for Jesus. Some of you are familiar with Jews for Jesus. You can go to the next slide. Some of you are not. You go to the next one. There we go. So we have an office here in Southern California in Westwood near UCLA in Los Angeles. We own a building there. A few years ago, we had the chance to turn the building in the first floor. I was the leader of the branch and had my desk where I would work, and noticed that nobody was coming in to our office. And went out and looked at the walls, and it looked like a dentist's office that nobody wanted to go into. And I thought, well, that's not going to work. So we renovated the whole thing, and we've turned the whole first floor into a cafe, art gallery. We have a recording studio. It's really going great. COVID hit a year ago. We closed down initially, but we reopened with to-go. And as of next week, we should, for the first time, reopen for in-person coffee, inside service. It's very exciting for us. This is the inside. Yeah, amen. And so this is the inside of the cafe. If you're in the UCLA area, come on by, have a cup of coffee. And the people that run the coffee are all part of our staff. And their commitment to coffee is only slightly less than their commitment to Jesus. I mean, ever so slightly. And so if you want to talk about coffee, spend some time, because they can talk about coffee for a long, long time. So go to the next slide. So this is, again, a little bit about our cafe. We call it Upside Down. Jews for Jesus, there's all kinds of upside down stuff. This is on the left there is an art show that we hosted. She's a Biola student. No, not anymore, but and we have different ones that have come in. So it's exciting to see our ministry continue. I will tell you, in the last year, it's been strange. However, we have been busier than ever. People's interest in spiritual things has not gone away. In fact, it's grown. And so the number of phone calls and Zoom calls and front yard visits and and internet, emails back and forth, we have had a ton of people who are interested. And so it's been a really fruitful season for us. And that's not just a silver lining. What I'm telling you is that God has been at work, right? Not in spite of the pandemic, but God's been at work because God's always at work. And so none of this has stopped what He's doing and what He's doing through us. So it's been a really great season. Maybe the next slide. I can't remember what the next slide is, actually. Okay, I'll go back to the other one. I have one announcement for you that's pretty exciting, and particularly if you're going to Israel. We are starting this spring, opening a new office in Israel. So we have an office right now in Tel Aviv. It's our largest office worldwide. We have 45 full-time staff working out of our Tel Aviv office, all Israelis. And they're doing all kinds of different things. We are ministering to homeless people. We're ministering to prostitutes on the streets. Prostitution is legal in Israel. We're ministering to religious people, to secular people, Russian speakers, Ethiopian, Amharic speakers. And we are, in this spring, opening our first office in Jerusalem. So, very exciting. I had the chance to do ministry in Jerusalem a couple of years ago. We had an outreach campaign in 2018 where we took 9 different teams to Israel to do various outreach. I led one of those teams. I led the team focused on sports and why they picked the balding, middle-aged, slightly overweight Jewish guy to lead the sports outreach, I don't know, but it was great. We had a wonderful time. We had amazing opportunities. We did an everyday kind of free workout class in the main park of Jerusalem from 5:30 to 8. We had consistently 30 to 40 people coming, joining us. We had snacks and water and everything, hanging out afterwards. And every night, there were conversations. Every single night. The openness to the gospel in Israel is so much greater than it is here in the United States. However, the resistance to the gospel is also that much greater. It's just more intense. And Jerusalem is the most intense of the intense. So we have 4 staff already living there. One more is in the process of moving, being held up by some visa stuff. but he and his wife should be there soon, and so we will be launching our Jerusalem outreach. So at the end of the service, there's going to be a way to sign up to receive information from Jews for Jesus. We're not going to do cards this year. We're getting used to things like being with other human beings. So we have a text that you can sign up and give. All of the gifts this year are going to go to support the work in Jerusalem. So this is going to be sort of our seeds for that work in Jerusalem. So if you would like to give, please know that's an opportunity for you to do so. But for now, what I need to do is walk back into the Passover because we have a few more things to do. Okay? So, let me catch you up on what's happened so far. So, we've gone through the first part of the Passover. In a traditional Passover, hours have passed. Many hours. It's later. We've eaten, right? We're still reclining at the table. Maybe now more after the meal than before the meal. We bring back our Passover Haggadah. And now we have to find the missing piece of afikomen. So, now is when I need you. Underneath either your seat or someone else's seat near you is taped a small plastic bag that has a white, shiny... Oh, look at you. All right. Come on up. Here, you get a bowl of horseradish. Here you go. All right, there you go. All right, there you go. Here, and here's some more matzah. There, take it. No, yeah, okay. Okay, so now, so what happens now is that the child finds the matzah, brings it back to the head of the house. It's actually, there's a fun game with the kids where it's actually sold back to the father, and there's some bargaining that goes on. And then he takes it out, and it is made visible and then broken up into smaller pieces, and everybody at the table gets a small piece of that afikomen, and then it's eaten at the same time as we have the third cup, the cup of redemption. Does this sound familiar? Okay. Don't miss the symbolism. This bread that was found by the child came from the middle of a 3-layered pouch. 3 in 1, 3 matzahs in one container. The middle piece of that tri-unity is removed, made visible, broken, wrapped in a cloth, hidden away, left there for a while, brought back, redeemed with a price, made visible again, given out to everybody at the table. What is this supposed to represent at Passover? It's supposed to represent the body of the Passover lambs that were sacrificed in Egypt. Jesus said, "This is my body that was broken for you. Do this in remembrance of me." What Jesus did when he celebrated Passover is he drew a map, in a sense, and connected himself with the Passover lambs in Egypt. And he said to those disciples at the table and to us, "I am the Passover lamb. I am the one that has sacrificed my body for your freedom." And then it says, then he took the cup after the meal. And the cup taken after the meal is called the cup of redemption. It is the wine on Passover is supposed to be red, not white, because the red wine is supposed to remind you of the blood of the Passover lambs. And when he took this cup, which is the only cup taken after the meal, at least in his day, he took this cup and he said, "This cup which is poured out for you is the new covenant in my blood." Again, identifying himself with the lambs that were sacrificed in Egypt. So on Passover, the broken piece of afikomen, the third cup, the cup of redemption, are taken together in remembrance of the body and the blood of the Passover lamb. And I can tell you tonight that my Passover lamb is Jesus. You can go to the next slide. Let's see, the fourth cup. Okay. So the Passover ends with praise. Normally what we would do is we would recite the great Psalms of praise. Psalm 113 through 118. We would recite them all. We would sing them all. We know that at the Passover that Jesus celebrated, it ended with a hymn. Could it be that that hymn was one of these Psalms? It could be. It wouldn't be surprising. And we end our Seder with drinking the fourth of our four cups, called the cup of praise. At the end of these Psalms, we drink this cup and praise God for being the God who delivers from slavery. But there's one last cup. It's kind of an interesting cup. And you can go to the next slide, because this is a cup from which no one drinks. It's called the cup of Elijah. And in Jewish homes, if you would celebrate Passover, every Jewish home has a place set at the table for Elijah, the prophet. So it's, plate, silverware, there's a chair, a special cup that has wine in it. Why? Well, it's recorded by the Hebrew prophet Malachi, the last book in the Old Testament, that before the coming of the Messiah, he'll be preceded by the return of Elijah the prophet. And it was thought that since this is a holiday about redemption in the past, the redemption of the future would be announced at Passover. Makes total sense. And it would be announced by Elijah. Also makes total sense. So, where's he going to come? We don't know. Maybe your house. So, everybody sets a seat. A child goes to the door, opens it up, calls for Elijah to come into the home, share the Passover, and announce the coming of the Messiah. But I can tell you Elijah has already come. In the New Testament, we read that John the Baptist, John the Baptizer, preparing the way for the Messiah, was identified as Elijah the prophet. It says, if you care to accept it, he himself is Elijah, the one who was to come. The prophet, the forerunner, has come, and so has the Messiah. This cup raises a question, even an invitation for us. For some people, the question of who Jesus is settled. But for others, it isn't. Some would ask, what's a Jewish guy doing in a church talking about Passover? I'm here because I've settled that issue. But in some ways, I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not the one that's supposed to believe in Jesus. It's supposed to be other people. It's not supposed to be me. So I'm here because, actually, surprisingly, God showed himself to me. God redeemed me, set me free in a way that I cannot look toward any other explanation. I never, ever would have thought that I would be the one who believes in Jesus. It makes sense for me not to be the one. And you might be here and you might be in that same situation. You might be thinking, yeah, this is good for you, this is good for him, this is good for them, but for me, it's just not for me. Well, this cup invites you to consider that perhaps Passover, perhaps the lamb, perhaps the blood, perhaps all of this is for you. Perhaps you are the one that God desires to redeem. What are you going to do about it? I don't know. But I can tell you that you're part of a group of people who would love to talk to you. You could talk to me, but the reality is there's a whole bunch of people here who would love to explain to you how this works. So, my encouragement to you tonight, at least put the issue on the table, whatever that means for you. Start a conversation, write something in a journal, maybe pray to God, make a commitment to do something, but just do something to put the issue of who Jesus is on the table. The Passover ends with a statement, and it is next year in Jerusalem. Who knows? Maybe for some of you, it'll be next fall in Jerusalem. But Passover ends with a statement next year in Jerusalem, that by this time next year, may God return, bring all things into completion, bring everything that he has promised to a conclusion. And may we celebrate Passover together in the city of Jerusalem. That would be quite an amazing thing, huh? So, what we can say, let me end with this. Say with me, next year in Jerusalem, come Lord Jesus. Come, Lord Jesus. Amen. Thank you.
This has been a presentation of Refuge Calvary Chapel, Huntington Beach. For more information about our ministry, please visit refugefamily.com or call 714-891-9495.
Set free.